I'm excited to be headed to San Diego on November 4th and 5th this year for the ERE Recruiting Innovation Summit. This event always brings together the best in talent acquisition, recruiting leaders, HR executives, HR tech, people that are really shaping where this industry is going. It's more than just a pitch fest. I mean, this is where actual learning comes in. They've been around for 30 years. It's a great event at San Diego in November. And you're going to have some excellent speakers, demonstrations. We have pin.com there. Joel Loudry will be there. You'll have the team from ERE there, Jim Stroud. These are people that have been shaping the industry this decade and really where it's going in terms of AI and the blend with AI and recruiters and all that good stuff. I went in April this year, and it was a transformative experience. We had a great time with Digital Recruiter booth and speaking and just people learning about automation and content and AI tools. It was just really cool event. So I'll be an official content partner representing Digital Recruiter. So we're going to be capturing videos, doing man on the street, interviewing the speakers, the sponsors, really getting a pulse on the action. So if you're in talent acquisition, if you're agency recruiter, this is the place to be on November 4th and 5th. Go meet your peers in person, learn from them. There's virtual tickets, there's in-person events. It's an awesome time. And so please enjoy our ERE podcast series so it gets you a glimpse of all the people that are going to be at ERE, and we'd love to see you there. All right, welcome back. Another episode of the ERE Recruiting Innovation Summit podcast series. Again, it's November 4th and 5th in San Diego this year. It's going to be an awesome event. Part of the reasons is that there's always live band karaoke, and I have one of the stars of the live band karaoke session from April. But more importantly, he's the godfather of sourcing, founder of the Sourcing Institute, associate principal consultant at Riviera Advisors, has transformed recruiting from companies like Google, Microsoft, Cisco, Coca-Cola, all this good stuff. We've got TSI University that he's founded. But more importantly, he sings a killer rendition of Hotel California.
From a wheelchair.
Shally Steckerl, how are you, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Yeah, doing all right.
Excited to run it back?
Yeah. Is that what that means nowadays?
I think run it back. Yeah. I asked if we could do another song, but it's like I think that's the go-to. So you get the whole crowd into it. But
maybe I'll do something else.
Maybe something. We'll see.
I gotta practice. I can do some what's that called? The Mongolian.
The Mongolian throat singing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would. That would bring half the house down and terrify the other.
You're right.
I would be cheering you on. That'd be hilarious. But it's great to have you on here. We're excited for you to speak on day 2 at 1:20 PST. It's going to be executive hiring, a scientific framework that cuts review time by 86%. And I gotta ask, I've been dying to ask, how'd you come up with the 86% number? Right? Why this topic and how 86%?
Well, so there's a whole backstory to this. It started out as by the way, all of this is 100% hands-on practical stuff that I actually did. Right, none of it is theoretical, but it started out as a simple request that we needed to review 60 applicants for a distinguished fellowship. And it's a very coveted position, very important. And it's not typical. It's not like you're applying for a job and interviewing for a job. It's very different in some ways, because there's like the application packet includes your proposal, which is like the idea that what you're going to, as a researcher, what you're going to do, how you plan to get funding. It's important to have letters of recommendation from your current mentors and professors and stuff like that, your academic transcript. I mean, it's different, right? Like, it's not a resume and an interview. In fact, there's not even really an interview until the selection committee selects the people whose ideas on paper and whose research and everything, kind of align. And then they have like a narrower selection. Then that goes to, the committee for interviews and stuff like that. So, in a typical year, we usually will look at about 20. And that's something that is, there's a committee of people that can manually look through that. We had 60. And it was a kind of a bumper year. So we do this twice a year. So the reason that they tapped me was because I had done 2 projects prior to this. One was I was involved in selecting the governor's chair for a scientific leadership position for the state, and the committee. These are scientific leadership positions, often involve committees, by the way. The committee was really impressed with the rubric that I presented when I was evaluating candidates for them to review for selection for interview. So kind of like you would present a candidate. This was more like presenting, a slate, right? Because it was a pretty high visibility role. And so they were really impressed with it. They were able to make a decision much quicker. And then they asked me to do it again with another role. So I had done this a couple of times, I think 3 or 4 times, when the DSF positions became available. And they're like, we really need some help with this. Do you think you can adapt your method for this? With the adaptation necessary being, excuse me, actually evaluating the proposal itself, the paper and it was extra stuff. Excuse me. I'm so sorry about that. So I think this was around the 5th time that I'd done this. And at this point I started tracking metrics that the first couple of times it was just like experimental. So I didn't really go back and track. So I started tracking some metrics, and using the scientific method, I went back and I applied the rubric, the whole process to the DSFs, and they loved it. It was like what we ended up with. Out of the 60, it was pretty obvious that there were 20 that needed to move forward to the next to the selection committee. There were 20 that needed to be reviewed manually because they were just like, we like them, but we're not really sure they could be included, right? And then there were 20 that, well, definitely 18 of them for sure that were like, okay, these are definitely not, they're not aligned, they don't fit, it's not a fit. So it made things a lot easier. Instead of having to review 60, right? They only had to review 20. You see what I'm saying? So that right there is a huge savings in just that one area. But we also started looking at downstream. So things like, for example, when I reapplied the formula to a previous program, I blinded the results. I told them, send me the candidates, but not the people that you selected. And I want to apply this rubric to that one in retro, because this one we applied moving forward, but I wanted to actually test it against one where humans already decided, right? So I went back and I reapplied it, or applied it to that set, and we had some really similar results. So this confirmed that the process was really good at mimicking actual results. So not only did we prove it moving forward with the job, but we also proved it in testing a kind of a blind test, right? And that's at that point now I was starting to see the optimizations in efficiencies for example, the amount of time that it takes to review all of these applications. So resume review, in non-scientific layman's terms, if you will, is the typical process of like, you got 200 applicants. And if you really were actually going to, many of us probably don't really do this. We try to, somehow make it a little bit more efficient. But if we had to literally review 200 applicants, I'm sorry, it would take forever. So, things like, for example, it would take I'm just going to throw some numbers. This is not real math. Let's say it takes me 7 minutes to look at a resume and an applicant, a real applicant, right? And to determine, move forward, not, et cetera. And I got 200 of those. Well, that's 200 times 7. So if I can accelerate that process, then I know I'm saving some time. But then on top of that, I'm also saving some time on the front end, on the sourcing side, because I can do more automation with the top of the funnel. Then I'm saving a lot of time on the review side. And then I'm also saving some time in the packaging and presenting side. Instead of one at a time, back and forth, or short sprints or whatever, I've got a packet, in this case, let's say 20. And they love to look at that on a spreadsheet. Everybody votes. So it short circuits the amount of hours, but also the days that it takes. So this is not really an arbitrary number. We actually tracked all of this and looked at the amount of time and estimated. Now, these are estimates, but we applied the estimate to every single project since then, and it's consistently, basically quadrupling our speed. I mean, if it takes us 4 hours to do something with this process, it only takes 1.
It's a similar application to kind of what we see on my side of digital. I work with a lot of agency recruiters that, again, their job is to cut down, right, the sourcing and screening time, the short list of candidates for clients,
Sourcing, screening,
right, all that stuff.
Presenting.
Exactly.
Right?
So then the manager just has a short list of 3 or 5, whatever that looks like. And so with LinkedIn automation, we found like building the list, you still have to build the right list, right? But you can automate it and figure out the messaging that makes it relevant to the person, given if you know how to source correctly, right, which talks about qualifying, right, the metrics of the rubric.
You have to get the segmenting right.
Correct.
And that's the rubric is the very foundation of it. It used to be the intake meeting, but now it's the rubric. It's still, the intake meeting is important because it's part of the rubric, but the intake meeting getting plugged into the rubric is absolutely critical. Now, isn't it ironic that when hiring managers tell you, in 30 years as a consultant, I see this a lot. Hiring managers say, we need more resumes. I want more resumes. You don't get it. I'm not getting enough resumes. What it really means is they want fewer. They just don't tell you that.
Yes.
So if you send them more resumes, they have less time to decide, less time to deeply evaluate. If you send them fewer resumes, they spend more time, more quality time, and they don't ask for more. It's like, when it's almost like when I hear I want more resumes, what I really am hearing is I want fewer but better.
I want you to help me interpret what I'm looking at and why.
And send me less.
Yes, send me less.
Too much.
Tell me why I'm not into these candidates. And it's always a trigger. I'm telling agency recruiters all the time. That's your signal to slow down, get on a call, and have them talk it out, because they don't know how to articulate or make sense of what they're seeing, but they know something's off. So the ones that don't work well are the ones that they just oblige and they keep sending it. But no, as a recruiter, you have to be the leader in the hiring process. And a leader, you have to interpret, be able to listen, like, wait, what's going, like, talk it out with me. And like, let me see how I can interpret what you're saying, because we clearly need to like give you more context on who we've sent, or I need more context on the role because there's a miscommunication happening. Right. And so often I just see that doesn't happen, agency or internally. It doesn't happen. Right. And that kind of calibration period, to your point, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you sounds like you see it like the same way. It happens on kind of on both sides. But like, it's such an interesting topic that it's like the inverse of what they're actually saying. So I guess the question is, like, how do you recommend people like address that, right, when they're in the heat of the moment when that's happening? What's your best practice on addressing that problem?
Addressing which part of it?
Like the I need more resumes problem.
Usually it's when I get involved, it's because the intake wasn't done or it wasn't done thoroughly. So I do it or redo it, and then come back to, it's almost like, all right, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. You need more resumes, but before I go out there and go find you some people, and before I start, let me figure out what's missing, like, what have you not been seeing? And, so I dive into that. That's typically the answer. But if I'd already done the intake, then it's usually a matter of calibration or titrating the resumes. So, or the, profiles or whatever. So like what I typically do, and I've been doing, and there's something new that I didn't put in the abstract, but what I've been doing has been, during that first setup, sending like what I like to call a sandwich. One that exceeds, one that doesn't meet, and one that's kind of in the middle, right? So if, let's say it's the requirement is must have a bachelor's in this or master's and 10 years of experience. So my exceeds will have a master's and 15 years. My doesn't exceed will have a bachelor's and 8 years, right? And my middle will have like a bachelor's and 15 or something like that, right? So that gives me an idea as to where the tolerance is, and I can kind of, so are they much more interested in the exceed? Like if this person's looking at the one that's at the, the top of the scale, then I know I need to sort of lean that way. If they're okay with the one in the middle, or if they even look at the one without some of the experience, I can come back and say, well, I'm interested in why, this one's still good because you said they had to have at least this much. But what I started doing is, and this is again not made it into the paper yet, is using a Monte Carlo statistical. Monte Carlo?
No.
So Monte Carlo simulations are or the Monte Carlo method is a statistical analysis that uses repeated random sampling to model the probability of different outcomes in a process. So kind of like go this way, 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 and you measure all of it, and it uses like a lot of different samples. So what I've been doing is I've been using, on top of that, not because I can do this with the AI, on top of the rubric, I'm using a Monte Carlo mathematical model with some random inputs and running through 10,000 simulations per resume on those 20 resumes to get a statistical deviation, or basically a confidence scale. And what that does is it gives me a range of, based on what you think of it this way, like based on what you define as the rubric, based on what you said is success, these resumes are within this range of likelihood of success to the match. So I'll just throw out a range, like 75% to 83%. And that's the thing about this multicolor simulation, is it doesn't give you one number, it gives you a range, kind of like a candle chart, right? So I can then look at these 20 and have those little candle charts where, this one might be 60 to 80. That's a pretty broad distribution. So there's a lot of room for error. I'm not as comfortable with that one as I am with this one that's like 75 to 83. That was a lot more narrow, but I'm a lot more comfortable with that one than I am with the one that's 66 to 68%, because that's, very narrow, but really low. So now I have like a confidence scale that I present instead of what I used to do, which was sorting on a raw score. Let's say that the rubric adds up to 100 points, 10 points per column, and with a multiplier, right? So if you have a bachelor's degree, you get 1 point. If you have master's, you get 2 points. Yeah. That's an easy way to, think about it, right? Minimum requirement is a 0. Like if you have the minimum requirement, you pass. But if it's nice to have a bachelor's, then +1. If it's nice to have a master's, +2. So I used to give them a score of 87. But that was, especially the scientists, they looked at that and went, that's a pretty exact score. Kind of like you were the 86%. Like, it's a pretty exact score. What's up with that? What does that really mean? And then they kind of ignored it. But this, they don't ignore as much because it's now like an estimate. And they like estimates better.
Interesting.
Oh, now instead of ranking, from 100 to 0, well, I never presented anybody in this slate that scored less than a 50% score. It's usually in the 60s and up. But now I can, instead of having some sort of arbitrary cutoff, I present everybody, and then I have that scale, and then they can look at it as, is it narrow or is it high, or both, or is it narrow and high, and then they make better selections. Still, all I'm trying to do is get them to focus more time on fewer candidates that have a higher percentage of passing. And the other thing that I'm doing is presenting candidates that are not in the mainstream. So these are not the same people they always see.
Yeah. How are you getting to that point beyond being the sourcing godfather? But like, where do you?
That's part of the top of the funnel. Yeah, because I'm bringing it. It's kind of like fishing. If you go fishing in the same spot over and over again, you're likely going to catch the same type of fish, the same size fish. Maybe you change your bait, whatever, but it's still pretty consistent. So this is more like analyzing the entire lake. And I'll catch the rare weird ones that nobody ever even thought of, because who thinks of going to that spot? Oh, that's right in the middle of the sunny spot and no fish is ever going to be there except for this one, because it's big enough that it doesn't care and it can eat whatever and nobody threatens it. So, and I found that one, but it doesn't look like the other fish.
And it's amazing how when you have the rubric, when you have some automation, I think that's what we found kind of on our end. We have clients that are able to kind of explore and push the boundary, look at other sources, look at maybe get more creative with their sourcing by leveraging automation and AI versus just relying on it to put their job on autopilot. I think that's always what's interesting. People leveraging these tools to kind of think bigger, think differently, or increase their productivity on top of funnel, so they have more time for medium, bottom of the funnel, or sourcing from different top of funnel areas that they weren't able to get to before. I think that's what's so interesting about kind of where this is at, and the approach I see kind of working is more that one versus just like, oh yeah, it's gonna like do everything for me.
Yeah, the whole when you push a button, so there's a huge fallacy in our industry, especially with people who don't know our industry and they come in from other places like super smart data scientists and stuff like that. They think that if you have a rec, you can match it to a resume, but they don't understand that most of the time, job postings, first of all, aren't really job descriptions. They're marketing documents. And even if they were a job description and you use a job description, these are usually written well in advance and they were written for somebody else. And even if they're written for this job now and it's brand new, it still hasn't really been tested or validated. There's a lot that goes wrong with these things. So if you just try to match a job posting or a rec to a resume, there's too many differences. First of all, you have the fact that it may not even really be exactly what the hiring manager really wants. Then you have the fact that it hasn't really been weighed. There's a list of requirements, but they don't have weight. Then there's the fact that it could be outdated information. It could be applicable to somebody who learned on the job and that skill doesn't exist. And then there's the fact of the matter that candidates speak a very different language when they discuss what they do than hiring managers speak when they discuss what they want. Like if I was going to hire a recruiter, I would have a job posting that said must have whatever 5 years of experience, no applicant tracking systems, knowledge of EEOC and OFCCP and whatever. But if I'm a recruiter, I don't say I have knowledge of OFCCP. I don't say what do I say? I help companies hire people. I help companies find talent. So it's a different language, and it's not a semantic thing. It's not like you can look it up in a dictionary. So all of these AI tools out there that are trying to match job description, they don't work. Even if they're trying to match a resume, they don't work. You have to have this knowledge from the rubric, from the intake, from the experience, from samples of resumes, from training the module, from trial and error. And then it's, a matter of judgment also, because there are patterns that computers see that humans can't see because they're too difficult, because there's too much data. But there are patterns that humans see that computers don't see. And these are logical leaps. These are leaps in logic that are gaps in machine learning.
It's context. I mean, it needs context. It's the
subtext,
context.
Subtext.
And then it's the difference between the science of recruiting and the art of recruiting, which
it's the jagged edges, right? It's like if you're trying to put pieces of a puzzle together, it's what's a lot harder. Is it a puzzle where all the pieces are exactly square, or is it a puzzle where all the pieces are jagged and have like imagine if every piece had a different shape. I don't even know if that exists, but like a puzzle where every single puzzle piece was a completely different shape.
You need someone to kind of be able to put it all together. And
it's the jagged edges. Yeah. How does this? I think I know what this looks like. I've seen this before. Some people call it intuition, some people call it instinct, some people call it innovation, creativity, whatever.
But it's that mixed with some, to your point, the data, the AI, the automation. But you got to have people that can interpret it, right? But also start it on the right direction. To your point, just relying on the job description, which is such a great point. That's been the downfall, I think, of a lot of these tech tools. They're starting with the wrong premise of what is needed to get the result, and it's like, no, that thing is the wrong thing. Like that is the problem. Is that in the way everyone views the job description or views easy apply and stuff like that. So I love it. I love it. This is going to be, I think, just it's a really important topic because gets into the nuance. This is, I feel like, how you transition yourself as a recruiter and evolve to the next level. It's like figuring out this, testing the job descriptions, knowing when to do pushback, knowing how to calibrate searches. Like this is the magic and becoming better. And if you fix that piece of it, well, automation or content marketing, all that stuff can really help you, right? As someone that has 186,000 followers on LinkedIn now, right? Like you can amplify that reach, but you have the core of it, you know how to do well, right? And so then you can leverage that knowledge, get that out there to the market, and people resonate with it. But if you haven't figured out the actual job itself, and everything else is kind of meaningless.
It's a timeless problem. I mean, automation is always a push and pull. When assembly lines were first brought on to service or put into service or whatever, there were problems with quality, and then we went back and said, all right, we need to do quality control and Six Sigma and just in time and Kanban and to fix the quality problems. And so it's the same thing right now. I mean, what we're going through right now is identical to what we went through when the internet sort of blew up. Like at first, the internet, when I was an early adopter of, believe it or not, the internet, right, in the 90s, it was a Wild West. You could do just about anything, and there wasn't a lot out there. But when you found it, you were one of the first movers advantage, right?
Yeah.
But then the internet became standard, and all these kinds of tools started coming up, and Monster, Career Builder, Hot Jobs, Net Temps, all that stuff. Then came social media, which was a similar type of disruption, which sort of socialized or democratized information so that it was accessible to everybody. Everybody could be a blogger now. You could push a button and become a blogger.
Yes.
Now, this is the same kind of a leap. It's a leap forward, but we're in the baby stages, the infancy of, like right now is 1996 to 2000 internet, or 2010 LinkedIn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the AI, so there's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to be rewritten, and there's massive amounts of risk, and people need to understand what those risks are, especially with automation. The risks are enormous, and I'm not just talking about getting sued. I'm talking about risk of information, risk of liability. There's a lot of risk. We just don't know what it is yet. Just like there was risk on the internet, just like there was risk with social media. Remember all those? You probably remember this when social media started blowing up and people were like, post your jobs, help us market stuff. All of a sudden, companies had to come up with like social media handbooks.
Yeah.
So here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Don't say this. That's kind of people kind of know now, but there's going to be social media manuals for ChatGPT.
Yeah, and the consequences of that, right? You can't complain about Becky online. We got to keep that. You got to address that differently, or post a picture of your lunch or whatever during at 3 p.m. when you're kind of supposed to be working, and all those different kind of guidelines. I think it is very similar. I think it's talking to people.
Now you have people posting stuff on ChatGPT, not posting, but like pushing stuff into ChatGPT that's literally company confidential.
And it's like public on a free account. It's like public information.
They're not aware. They're not doing it on purpose. It's not malicious, but it's like, oh, I really need help with this. This is really easy, and there's nothing in here that's proprietary, is there? I mean, they don't think about it. So
yeah, and then the consequence, and I think it'll be interesting. It's a theme that's come up over and over. I know some of that compliance piece of it is going to be definitely a topic at the ERE conference. I think that is really important for teams. We have to kind of figure that piece out. Now, as someone that's an ERE veteran, right? You've been a few times. Why should people, why ERE? Why should people kind of go to this event, either ideally in person, if not virtually? What makes kind of ERE, worth attending in your eyes?
Well, they say they consolidated a bunch of different events that they had, they purchased over the years, and these events all had kind of different origins and different audiences. Yeah. But I think that the right move to consolidate them into one is a good move, because while at the same time there'll probably be people there with very different objectives, and they may, sometimes not necessarily be interested in this speaker or that speaker. And there may be vendors that are serving needs that don't necessarily serve the majority of attendees. But this kind of broader arena invites more discussion and cross-pollination of ideas. So on the one side, yes, it's good to have these specialized conferences like SourceCon used to be, but it can also be a little bit silo generating. So I think this is a good idea to bring in all the three major kind of core components of the overarching talent acquisition, landscape into one place for that cross pollination. So it's the people, especially if you go in person. It's making connections and meeting with people that are able to help you expand your horizons, for your own career and for your ideas at work. And it's a variety of, one of my biggest, I would say, sources of discovery. And as a researcher in the space, it's not a Einstein eureka moment. It's constantly experimenting and iterating and talking to people about what they did and how they tried it. And let me add a little bit of that. And that's interesting. Let's try that. So for me, it's never like I discovered, it's more like that's interesting. I wonder what happens with. And so this is an environment where you can do that, where you can listen to different perspectives. You may have no interest in scientific hiring. You may have no interest in creating, a rubric like mine, but at least during the presentation, you'll be exposed to some ideas that may be translatable to what you do. So I think it's that cross pollination that really kind of gets to the matter.
I think it's really well said. I completely agree. I mean, even I haven't recruited for a fellowship position or anything else like that, right? Or the companies you worked at, a lot of Fortune 500, some 100, right? Big name. I haven't been in those environments, but to hear your process and how you approach things, what you see work and don't work, it's so parallel to what I've seen work and not work in my own space. I think translatable is the key word, because I'm sitting here listening and taking it in. I'm like, I wonder, like, that validates some of the things that I've seen on my end, and are there ways to expand on that? Or
some of them, and some of them are not, right? Some of them is like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me.
But
might not work for tech. It might not work for health. Yeah, but you don't know that.
But also just to know that it does work for that, and kind of knowing actually when things could work and not work, I think is also valuable, like, for me, right? Because it's a lot of, it could be shiny object syndrome, or it could be just the not knowing, right? The not, you don't know what you don't know, and kind of you solve a lot of that. And sometimes the process of elimination is more important than just the process of taking in new information and learning a bunch of stuff as well. So I'm with you. I think it's for me, it's kind of a new frontier horizon to kind of go to a conference like this, talk to more, HR, HR tech companies versus more my normal day-to-day of agency recruiting. And I learn a ton. It actually helps me kind of have a clear picture of what we're doing day to day. So that's why I can't recommend it enough, is because of that, and kind of getting out of your comfort zone and all that. It kind of helps, it just helps with actual my day to day, even if it's not always like direct apples to apples. So
it's a good way to put it.
Any last words of wisdom? Again, you're speaking day 2, 1:20 p.m. PST. You can, obviously in person or virtual. But any last words of wisdom, before we wrap it up?
I think, if you're going to come to this event in person or virtually, I think the biggest mistake that you can make and that you should avoid is just sitting there quietly and like absorbing it. I know a lot of us, especially in sourcing, are introverts, but I think it's a good idea to just set yourself out there and try to push the boundaries on your comfort zone, and have conversations, because the dialogue is, I think, a lot more important than absorbing. You can sit there and watch TV at an event. You can watch the big screen and listen to the speakers, but having the dialogue is an important part of internalizing the learnings. So make an effort to do that. You're on mute, I think.
My fault. We had a baby crying. I think try to cut it out. Not have the baby take over the whole podcast. You get out what you put in, right? Talk to the speakers after the presentation, or find them at one of the events before and after, or at lunch, right? Or sit down at a table and start a conversation and find out about people. Connect with them on LinkedIn, right? You use the QR code and all that stuff, and it's always amazing who you can meet by just kind of putting yourself out there. You're there anyway. You might as well take yourself out of the comfort zone just a little bit extra, right, and get a lot more out of it. So I appreciate it, Shally. I appreciate you being on here and just sharing, all the knowledge and kind of what you're working on, and and I'm excited for the presentation and to hit the karaoke stage again next
All
month.
right.
Yeah.
It's on.
All right, let's make it happen. Well, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, but also, check out ERE, get a ticket, meet us in person, grab a virtual ticket. Make sure to check out Shally's presentation. And until next time, y'all, happy hunting.